I'm Taylor Riggs in for Emily Chang, and this is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all of our top interviews from this week in tech. Coming up, Cook FaceTime. President Trump tours Apple's Austin, Texas factory at a time when the White House considers whether to exempt Apple goods from a 15% tariff. We'll have the latest. Plus, come clean. Senator Josh Hawley says big tech is spinning some tall tales. He wants Facebook and Google to stop using, quote, lawyer speak when it comes to tracking user data. And later, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates on how tech R&D is being seriously hampered by the ongoing U.S.-China trade tensions. His comments from the Bloomberg New Economy Forum. But we begin this hour with Apple. The company made news on two fronts this week. The first, President Trump's visit Wednesday to Apple's Austin, Texas factory. Cook met the president to discuss keeping Macs and iPhones free from tariffs. The other news involved the way Apple tests software. It's changing after a series of bugs marred the latest iPhone and iPad operating systems. Bloomberg Technology's Mark Gurman and D.A. Davidson analyst Tom Forte kicked off the conversation Thursday.
So basically, Apple's iOS software has been buggy the past few years. This particular release cycle with iOS 13, macOS Catalina, the HomePod speaker software update have been especially buggy. What Apple's doing is they're going to make it so engineers earlier in the process will be able to determine what's buggy, what's working, what's not working, in order to hopefully, in their minds, come up with a much more stable operating system when they ship each September.
Tom, I know that you cover the fundamentals of the business. In your opinion, when you analyze the company, at what point do you have to start to take a look at these software glitches and incorporate them into your analysis?
Well, I think, to the point that it has a dampening impact on unit sales for the company. So if you think about Apple, they have had some snafus over time with their technology, and it's not unusual for them to have issues with their software. The challenge here, though, is if you think about both new iPhone users and then old iPhone users who upgrade to the latest software, it's really part of that, feel for the consumer of having the latest and greatest Apple technology. So it's definitely something they need to improve. But when it has an impact on unit sales, that's when I get real concerned about it.
So, Mark, I'm curious, in your opinion, you have seen Apple come out with these glitches and have to quickly issue new updates. Is it better to do that, to get it out to the customer first, as Tom was alluding to, or would you prefer to see the company sit back and roll it out right the first time?
Well, I mean, they really don't have an option but to get them out at the proper time each year, right? They have to introduce it every June, and they have to release it every September, because to Tom's point, iPhone unit sales, selling new devices is the most important thing. The way these new devices are developed is they're built concurrently with the software updates, right? So it would be impossible to, let's say, ship the iPhone 11 without iOS 13. So they really have no choice. So it's not a matter of if they should or if they shouldn't. There's really no option here besides adding fewer features, which of course they're not going to do because the features are what drive sales.
Tom, I want to switch gears and talk about Tim Cook's visit with Trump yesterday at Apple's new factory in Austin, Texas. Broadly, as you take a look at Apple and Tim Cook's relationship with Trump, is Tim Cook and Apple doing the right thing by getting in front of the president, getting the president's ear, showing off new factories, even though it's small in Apple's terms?
The answer is absolutely yes. So I would argue that no publicly traded CEO has done a better job managing the relationship of the company with the president than Tim Cook has for Apple. And I think you see that in the recent tariff, to the extent that they adjusted the timing of it, which essentially gave Apple an opportunity to sell its new iPhones one more time without the full impact of tariffs. So I think that Tim Cook's done an amazing job. It's interesting to do a compare and contrast, if you want to, on how he's done versus Jeff Bezos and Amazon. And I think most recently, if you look at the Jedi contract that Amazon lost, suggests that Tim Cook's doing a much better job than Jeff Bezos and Amazon. So I think Apple's doing a great job managing its relationship with the president, and Tim Cook's leading that charge.
Mark, react to that. Is Tim Cook doing the best of all big tech CEOs?
I mean, I would agree that Tim Cook is doing what he needs to do from a bottom line perspective, from a financial perspective. Like Tom said, that he did get the tariffs on the iPhone delayed, and we'll see if this, dog and pony show yesterday plays into Apple either getting a waiver or a further delay on smartphone products. But at the end of the day, what they showed yesterday was not new in any way. They framed it as some sort of big launch. It's important to note this factory, those engineers, everything that we saw yesterday, everything you see on the screen right now, has been in place since 2013. So this is not new by any means. This is a 7-year-old existing infrastructure that has basically been portrayed as a new thing. And they're going ahead and thanking the Trump administration for this. On top of that, this is not the iPhone, the iPad, the Apple Watch, right? This is Apple's lowest volume product that they sell. So the impact that this would have had on Apple's bottom line, if this was a tariff product they produced in China, would have been so slim anyways. So it's really unclear what Apple's winning by doing this, other than bidding in this PR situation with the Trump administration in order to help prevent tariffs on other products like the iPhones moving forward, which of course is a smart business decision, but it's a bad PR move in the interim.
Well, Tom, within the PR machine that is Apple, is the political savviness of Tim Cook undervalued asset? Is that not being reflected in the share price?
Well, with the rebound in shares, it's hard to indicate what is not in the share price. So I do think the company, again, Tim Cook at the charge, has done an amazing job as the smartphone market has matured in starting to diversify its revenue base. You think about what they're doing with all their other hardware devices, including wearables, the watches. And then what we look at in particular is either the proprietary content or things they're doing in financial services, such as both Apple Pay and Apple Card, and then also healthcare. So I do think that it is reflected in shares, and it is warranted. I think he's done an amazing job managing the current administration, and it should be positively reflected in the price.
Tom, what's your base case scenario when it comes to tariffs?
Great question. So if you think about, so I'll give a quick example of Sonos, which is another company I covered, that indicated they're moving all their production into Malaysia and out of China. So I think the base case is that you're going to see more companies that are going to move their manufacturing operations out of China. In the case of Apple, Apple may never be able to move its smartphone manufacturing out of China, but it may be able to have more of its parts manufacturers move their own supply chains out of China, which could help it avoid some of the tariffs, in addition to Tim Cook's efforts to manage the administration there.
Mark, I want to switch gears a little bit as well, because we saw some technical glitches when Disney was trying to become a tech company and had to keep up with password thieves and password hackers. You've had Apple TV Plus now, a tech company, have some glitches when it comes to the rollout of their films, one of which they had to pull back. Is Apple TV Plus prepared to be a media company?
Yes, I think Apple's infrastructure for video streaming, the application development that it's had for a number of years has been there. So I think Apple, their cloud infrastructure on the consumer side isn't normally great, but I think there's really been no glitches. It's really been problem-free in terms of the rollout of new shows. I've seen this myself on my Apple products. Every time a new episode hits at midnight Friday Eastern time, you get a buzz on your phone that a new episode is available. It's ready to stream immediately. So I think their experience in the App Store and distribution like iTunes movie rentals has really prepared them for this. Password management has been a big focus for Apple for the last few years. Apple TV Plus is tied directly into family sharing. You can use TV Plus on that subscription, either free or $5 a month with 4 other family members. So from a technology perspective, TV Plus really has been problem-free so far, I would say.
That was Bloomberg's Mark Gurman and D.A. Davidson's Tom Forte. And coming up, Senator Josh Hawley is making his mark by taking on big tech. We'll hear from the senator on how he plans to make sure companies like Facebook and Google respect your privacy. That's next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. Google Google is severely limiting how political advertisers can target people online, a decision made after weeks of debate over how online platforms handle campaign messages. The tech company said on Wednesday it will stop allowing election ads to be targeted based on political affiliation on Google Search, YouTube, and across the web. It is also banning misleading information in ads. However, ad targeting based on users' age, gender, and location is still allowed. Senator Josh Hawley may be the junior senator from Missouri, but he's making a name for himself by being one of the Senate's most outspoken critics on big tech. He's introduced bills to make tech more transparent on data tracking, as well as trying to ensure U.S. consumers' data is not sent and stored in countries deemed a national security threat. We spoke with the Senator, Josh Hawley, Wednesday about taking on big tech, starting with the letter he sent to Facebook demanding they explain their location data tracking policies.
Facebook has said to its users now that they can turn off location tracking. Facebook users can, but as it turns out, you can't. Even if you say you don't want to be tracked by Facebook, Facebook on your phone continues to scan all of the Wi-Fi in your area. It continues to use your cellular location, and it continues to transmit that information to Facebook. So this is another misrepresentation, frankly, and I'd like to know, why is it Facebook is telling its users that they can stop tracking when in fact they cannot stop tracking? Google does the same thing, by the way, and I think this is just one more instance of these big tech companies not being honest with us about the data they're collecting.
So you think they're purposely misleading users?
I mean, I don't know how to read it any other way. I mean, you read the post that Facebook put up for all of its users saying that you can stop Facebook from learning your precise location. A very lawyerly phrase, as it turns out. I think the normal consumer would never imagine, if they say, I want to turn off my location services, that Facebook is actually still tracking them, still tracking the Wi-Fi, still using the cellular data, the cellular network to pinpoint their location. I think it's very misleading.
What would you like to hear back in response from Facebook?
I'd like to hear the facts. I mean, I want to hear their explanation for the difference between what they have told consumers and told their users and what they're actually doing. I mean, there's a huge gap there, and I'd like to hear them explain it in their own words, actually come clean, be honest, and set out the facts. But, you know, really, this just gets to, I think, the fact why we need to pass legislation. Congress needs to pass legislation that gives every single American the right to opt out of being tracked, period. No back doors, no workarounds. Every American should say, I don't want to be tracked.
Are you also planning to write a letter to Apple and Google, given that it runs on the Apple iOS software and Google's Android operating system?
Well, Google is already well aware of my concerns in this area, as is Apple. You know, Google has similar problems. I mean, Google testified to me under oath that their users could turn off location services and not be tracked. That's also not true. The Android phone constantly scans for Wi-Fi networks, constantly monitors your cellular network, even if location services are off, and it transmits that information to Google. So, as I say, the tech companies are really all doing the same thing. It is misrepresenting their positions to consumers while they collect this information. They need to stop.
You know, to be fair, we've heard a lot about data privacy. We've seen a few existing privacy legislation come out. They haven't gone anywhere. Why do you think yours has a chance to go somewhere?
Well, for one thing, it has bipartisan support. I mean, take the Do Not Track bill, which is a really significant move for consumers that would give every American the right to say, I don't want to be tracked. I don't want my location to be tracked. I don't want Google or Facebook or Twitter or anybody to scoop up information about me around the web, where I'm going. It would give every American a right to that. It's sponsored by Senator Feinstein from California, Senator Warner from Virginia. So we've got broad bipartisan support. It's a common sense measure, and it's something that consumers deserve to have.
I want to fold in your concerns about data privacy into big tech and antitrust, and the DOJ has sort of hinted at the fact that those two are a same issue. Is this a concern about data privacy, or do you have antitrust concerns?
Well, one of the reasons data privacy concerns are so pressing is because these companies are monopoly size. I mean, if we had a viable alternative to Facebook that wasn't scooping up so much data, that wasn't selling our information without telling us, then I would be less concerned. But the truth is, there aren't really viable competitors right now to Facebook. There aren't really viable competitors to Google, and that's a big problem. And so I am concerned about their anti-competitive conduct. I'm concerned that that's making the data privacy issues worse.
I think critics, though, to be fair, would say the big competitors are in China, and China tech is massive. If we break up U.S. tech, how do we take on China?
Well, I don't understand why promoting more competition, getting more innovation in the market would hurt our standing vis-a-vis Chinese competitors. But hey, listen, I've introduced legislation that would stop Chinese companies from entering this market if they're going to abuse our data collection. I've got a bill, for instance, that would stop companies like TikTok, a Chinese-owned company, from collecting all of this data and then sharing it with the Beijing government, because that's also a major privacy concern. So we can address the threat from China and the background threat there, which is Beijing getting our information, while also asking American companies to actually compete, to actually innovate, and to actually be honest with consumers.
So, Senator, I'm going to take the bait. Let's talk about TikTok and Apple. I want to know more about your solution, because we can't keep Apple out of China, and we can't really keep TikTok out of the U.S. How do we solve the problem?
Well, I mean, with TikTok, it's a pretty simple solution, I think, and that is to prohibit TikTok, which is a Chinese-owned company. It's important to know because they don't advertise that to consumers. Stop TikTok from transferring any data of Americans to China, sharing any of it with the Beijing government. We should just make that illegal. There should be a firewall there. And in the future, anytime a Chinese company wants to acquire an American company that is a data company, the State Department should sign off on that beforehand. There should be pre-clearance requirements. When it comes to Apple or any other company like Apple, they shouldn't be storing data in China and encryption keys in China. It's just too much of a security risk.
So TikTok should be under CFIUS review, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, TikTok, I think, is already under CFIUS review, but it should have been done on the front end. My bill would change that. It would require CFIUS to pre-clear, to sign off before a Chinese company can buy, or a Russian company for that matter, any country of concern when it comes to security. None of those companies in those countries should be able to buy an American company without pre-clearance.
What does a realistic tech bill look like that has a chance of getting passed?
Well, I think that we could start with Do Not Track. I think that is a huge protection for consumers. It has broad bipartisan support. It addresses data privacy issues. It also is pro-competition because the Do Not Track legislation goes to the very business model of Google and Facebook and also Twitter, for that matter. So I would start there. And I've said over and over that I don't think the goal of comprehensive privacy legislation, whatever that might look like, I don't think we ought to let that stand in the way of actually taking steps right now that would be good for consumers. So I'd start with Do Not Track, and then I would start with protections for children. I think that big tech shouldn't be able to direct ads to kids, shouldn't be able to track kids, and every parent ought to have the right to have their children's data deleted.
And around this issue, and arguably all regulation on big tech, Europe and the European Union has been much more strict than the U.S. Why have they been able to pass legislation and we haven't?
Well, I think because big tech has really purchased a lot of friends here in the Capitol. I mean, they have expanded their network of influence for years now, and they deploy it very strategically. I mean, give Facebook and Google credit. They know how to play this game. But the truth is, consumers are impatient. Parents are impatient. They are fed up with their kids being exploited online, being tracked online. Consumers are fed up with being tracked online and not having anything to say about it, having no way to opt out of it. And I think the American people are going to demand action by Congress, and that's why this body needs to act.
Senator, I want to address a bill that you have been talking about called Ending Support for Internet Censorship Act, which is intended to address claims of anti-conservative bias within big tech. The Heritage Foundation, it came out and said that if that bill is enacted, it regulates online content, but it does risk eroding a lot of the free speech. How do you respond to the Heritage Foundation?
Well, I would say that, first of all, this is a pro-free speech measure. We need more free speech, not less. We need less regulation, less monitoring of content on the basis of political viewpoint. My concern is because Facebook and because Google are monopoly-sized companies, when they decide that they're going to discriminate on the basis of political views against conservatives, against pro-life voices, against pro-religious freedom voices, that means those folks are effectively shut out of the digital marketplace. That just shouldn't be the case. So all of these companies say that they don't make decisions, content moderation decisions, on the basis of political viewpoint. My legislation just holds them to that. It says, okay, you should submit yourself then to an audit every year to make sure that that is accurate. And if it's not accurate, then they shouldn't be able to keep their special protections under Section 230.
That was Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. Still ahead, Santander's chairman says regulation should be a level playing field across all different sectors, not just for banks and big tech. And later, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates joins us from the Bloomberg New Economy Forum in Beijing. Hear his thoughts on artificial intelligence. This is Bloomberg. The chairman of Europe's largest bank, Santander, she's Anna Botín, has said that in the past there is a discrepancy between regulatory restrictions for big banks and big tech. She sat down with Bloomberg's Eric Schatzker Tuesday for an exclusive interview to discuss her views on regulating and partnering with tech companies.
What is a bank? What is a bank? Does a bank just take deposits and make loans? Of course. But we do payments. We have always, and our strategy, and by the way, you haven't asked me this, but our strategy at Santander since I arrived is to be a responsible bank and grow loyal customers. Loyal customers, if I ask you, Eric, who is your bank? You're going to have one bank in your head, even though you might have 5 accounts. Am I correct?
That's true.
Right, so you're like 99% of Americans and most people around the planet. And so for that to be the case, I need to know you, and that's based on data. So my question to you is, why should data be regulated, now I'm talking about Europe, in a different way if you're called a bank or if you're called something else? You know, you as a customer should be able to ask me to share my data, but vice versa, also from other players, so I can give you a loan at 6% instead of 7%. So that is all I'm saying is we need a fair playing field. And distinctions between sectors. This is not just about banks and payment companies. It's about, you know, transport companies, hotel companies. And so this is the issue we need to sort out.
Some of the big U.S. banks, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Citigroup, have started forming partnerships with tech companies to provide financial services.
Right.
Will Santander do that too?
We've been doing that. You know, we're 100% in favor of innovation. We've partnered with a company called Cabbage, Ripple, many American companies. So what we're doing is we want to take these companies and services. When we don't approve a loan, we pass it on to, in this case, Cabbage. Ripple is at the base of our OnePayFX blockchain base. So this is exactly the point. We need everybody else to be open. So my question to you, what is a critical infrastructure in the digital age? So we used to say telcos were critical infrastructures. Isn't a device a critical infrastructure?
Could make that argument.
Digital wallets. You know how many people have a digital wallet in the world today? More than 2 billion. When you have a digital wallet, who should be part of that arrangement? Is it just the user and the, you know, let's say the phone provider, or should it be whoever is issuing the card also? These are the things that we need to make sure we have clarity on.
That was Santander Chairman Anna Botín. And coming up, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates on chilly U.S.-China ties and what that means for cross-border collaboration, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. His comments from the Bloomberg New Economy Forum, that's next. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology and be sure to follow our global breaking news network at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Taylor Riggs. Climate, energy, and technology R&D is the focus of a conversation with Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates this week. He spoke to Bloomberg editor-in-chief John Micklethwaite from the Bloomberg New Economy Forum in Beijing. The two discussed climate change, changing energy uses, and carbon tax.
There's no doubt that solar and wind, including offshore wind, will be a huge part of that. Because those are intermittent sources, the need either for 24-hour sources like nuclear or unbelievable miracle in terms of both transmission and storage is very, very high. You can look at a country like Japan, Tokyo, 60 gigawatts. You have 7 days where you have no wind or sun power at all. So you have to say to yourself, if you're not going to have people freeze to death, what is the source of energy during that 7-day period? The U.S. Midwest, you have long periods where a cold front sits on it and the wind doesn't blow. So it'll be a lot of renewables and either a storage miracle or quite a bit of nuclear. The electric source will be almost 3 times as big because it'll be taking over parts of transport and industrial and heating that historically went to direct hydrocarbon usage. Anyway, people building models of that future grid, different universities, different people picking their choices, will be the sign that not only do we have a goal to be there by 2050, but we're debating the paths and very concrete plans. When you see things like a 15% diesel tax, create unrest, the willingness to make the type of change and investment in this, you can question whether it's there because the free rider problem has never been worse than it is in climate, particularly for middle-income countries that can appropriately argue that the historical emissions of the rich countries mean they get to wait till per person they've emitted as much as we have.
Do you think a carbon tax is the way to secure that? I mean, you pointed to the political difficulties of that, but surely that's the fairest way to do it.
Yeah, that's a way to do it. If you look at the U.S. in particular, I don't think it's likely to happen. And so, we've had tax credits on renewables. We've had renewable portfolio standards. You can get there in a way that's less neutral. There's a variety of regulations and helping nascent sectors. Certainly what's happened with solar and wind is very good. What's happened in the industrial sector in terms of how do we make steel, how do we make cement, people have sort of gotten excited about the low-hanging fruit. Electric cars, that's the easy part. You still have to do the grid, but the various things, including industrial, are very, very difficult. Nuclear, you get 1 million times as much energy per reaction as you do burning hydrocarbons. And so it's very advantaged if you do the design right. I can't say for sure it would succeed, but it'd be good in this innovation portfolio. We have to have a lot of bets knowing that some of them won't succeed.
And in that, I think your company, TerraPower, you think you've come up with a new design which would be safer and more efficient.
Yeah, in the computer, our design is amazing. And that's beautiful because you can simulate earthquakes, volcanoes, planes crashing into it, all sorts of things that none of the existing nuclear plants could you do any of that. And you can show that your costs and inherent safety are very, very strong. We need to build a demo plant. At one point, we plan to do that in China. The U.S. government decided that we shouldn't do that. And so now the backup plan now is that we'll try and build that demo plant in the United States. So it's not an easy endeavor, but none of the paths to climate success are risk-free.
We'll come back to US-China in a second, but how frustrating was that for you? You put all this money into setting up this technology. You had the Chinese on board to test it, and the Trump administration stopped.
Well, it's frustrating because I'd gone for a decade meeting with every Secretary of Energy, who had encouraged us, and actually, the U.S. government had created an agreement because you need explicit permission to do this type of collaboration. And so it was a surprise when that was withdrawn, and it meant that a lot of things we had done, it was a setback. In the very best case, it was a 5-year delay. In the worst case, it was a completely collapsed it.
A big theme of this conference, as I said, has been China and America. Earlier today, Henry Kissinger said we were in the foothills of a Cold War. As long as I've known you, you have been a passionate advocate of engagement with China. How do you view the current situation?
I'm even more passionate about the value of engagement than ever. The last few years have seen a lot of voices arguing against that, even arguing in some extreme cases for so-called decoupling. I think it's a benefit that there's interdependence. The fact that we have tourists from Japan, we have from China, we have students from China, we have companies that do research in China. Apple is the tech company that actually sells, the only tech company that actually sells a lot of products here in China. That interdependence can lead to more dialogue, more mutual understanding. And so to have people arguing against that is definitely a serious concern.
That was Bill Gates, Microsoft co-founder from Beijing. The New Economy Forum was organized by Bloomberg Media Group. It is a division of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. Now, the Bloomberg New Economy Forum also gave us the opportunity to hear from leaders in the tech sector on topics of the day, like the U.S.-China trade issue. We caught up with Micron CEO Sanjay Mehrotra, who caught us up on what challenges the chipmaker faces.
So what I can tell you is that I'm here in Beijing, and certainly this is a developing story. At this point, I don't have any specific comment to share with you on this.
Well, let me push a little bit. Have you had conversations with Wilbur Ross? How would you describe the conversations you're having with U.S. officials?
So what I'll tell you, Manas, is that we are a very large global company. We are well diversified. We are, of course, always engaging in conversations with the governments around the globe. And of course, we have been in touch with U.S. administration on an ongoing basis over the years, and certainly in recent times as well, because our business in China is certainly important to us. And as part of that, we have definitely.
Would you say the conversations are constructive?
Absolutely, our discussions with the administration are constructive. Yes.
Okay. The one thing I was just reading a little bit more about what's going on here in China. The state are putting about $29 billion into getting this country self-sufficient. Is that perhaps a bigger threat than the interim trade wars, self-sufficiency for technology supremacy here as a number one on the agenda?
So what I'll tell you is that the memory and storage products, DRAM and flash that Micron makes, these are extremely important when you look at the trends today of 5G, IoT, autonomous, cloud computing. And in this backdrop, with our technology innovation, the products that we bring to the customers here in China, we are really a very valued partner to those customers. Of course, Micron has a very rich history of 40 years, tremendous amount of innovation from the company, 40,000 patents generated over 40 years. So we are used to competition all around the globe. We, of course, continue to focus on bringing new products, new technologies to the benefit of customers around the globe, including the ones here in China.
Okay, and there are challenges therein from a production point of view. You've got to deal with the reality of a trade war. What I want to get a sense is how much additional production are you taking out of America and moving it into other global centers? Have you done that this year? Do you anticipate to do some of that next year?
We actually have manufacturing of our leading edge DRAM and flash products around the globe. In US, we have manufacturing. We have not taken any manufacturing out of the US. In fact, our center, our fabrication areas in Manassas, Virginia, is the center of excellence for automotive products for us, where Micron has #1 global market share. So we have a very well diversified global manufacturing footprint. Our supply chain is very resilient, very adaptive and agile, and certainly in these recent times where there certainly have been some challenges on the global trade front, we have shown that we have been pretty resilient in terms of addressing the challenges and moving on, continuing to bring value of our products to our customers around the globe.
That was Micron CEO Sanjay Mehrotra from Beijing. And the New Economy Forum was organized by Bloomberg Media Group. It is a division of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. Now, Qualcomm has been front and center in the development of 5G networks, including its strong partnership with Apple and some of China's biggest telecom firms. CEO Steve Mollenkopf sat down with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde Monday to discuss his views on Apple and how China's doing in the 5G race.
We have a very strong business in China, a lot of partners, including Huawei, that we sell to, and it continues to be, a big opportunity and a big business for us. And I would say, in some ways, actually isolated or insulated from some of the trade discussions. If you look, there's a lot of expansion happening worldwide with 5G in China. Qualcomm's a big piece of that, and it's a real kind of classic story of if you have technology that people want or need, or and you're the strongest partner or a strong partner, you have the ability to figure out ways that you can win-win. That's certainly been the case for us.
So you don't feel the business has been curtailed at all?
We've had a little bit of the change in I would say, the structure of the Chinese market as the Huawei handset business is really retrenched into China. It's changed the share a bit, and actually what people have done in reaction is they said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to accelerate my 5G plans, and I'm not going to spend so much time on 4G. And so what it's really happened is it's accelerated the intensity of the 5G rollout, and not just at the high end. It's actually gone down into several tiers below the premium tier. We're spending a lot of time getting the Chinese partners successful.
Do you think China's ahead of the US in terms of 5G?
Well, I would say not from the technology perspective. And the sort of the behind the scenes look is we're all working together to make 5G. If China and the United States don't work together to make 5G an international standard, then you'll really miss an opportunity worldwide. And you're not seeing that. You're seeing people cooperate in terms of the technology. That's the standards body. But if you look at the deployment, the speed at which base stations are rolling out, China's actually going quite fast. I think I made some comments about how it was going to be 130,000 base stations by the end of the year and 1 million next year in China alone. Those are tremendously large numbers if you put it in comparison to what you see in the United States. But that doesn't mean the United States isn't going quickly as well. It's just that you're seeing, for the first time in cellular, you're seeing China and the United States launching in the same calendar year. They used to be separated by 2 years or 5 years, depending on the generation. But now everyone worldwide is trying to figure out how to get to 5G quickly, and that's been good for us.
That was Qualcomm CEO Steve Mollenkopf. Coming up, trucks before taxis. Will Waymo's driverless fleet give truckers a lot more time at rest stops? We'll ask their chief product officer. This is Bloomberg. More on the race to advance 5G networks. FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel thinks there are many ways to make 5G services available, but both the FCC and the government administration are still figuring out the best solution to make that happen. She spoke to Bloomberg's David Weston a bit earlier.
As we move to 5G, we are going to need more airwaves to power that next generation of wireless services. And some of those airwaves are in a really sweet spot known as mid-band airwaves. And that C-band you're talking about is right there. But over time, the FCC allocated those airwaves to a lot of satellite services. And we may have, in fact, offered so much of those airwaves to satellite services that they could return some of them now and make them available for new terrestrial uses for wireless. And that's what's at issue here. What's the best way to make that happen? For a while, the FCC was exploring a private sale of those airwaves. But increasingly, it has started to look legally complicated, hard to do, and Capitol Hill has been involved and suggested that we should do this through a public auction. As a result, the FCC chairman has announced that he would prefer a public auction next year, and we are going to work with folks on Capitol Hill to see if we can do just that.
Okay, turn to one other dispute that came up within the last 2 or 3 weeks, and that's the 6 gigahertz dispute, as I understand it, which appears to be Wi-Fi on the one hand, companies like Broadcom on the one hand, versus utilities who say they really need that spectrum for emergency communication. What is that dispute about?
Yeah. You know, our airwaves, again, are getting complicated, and when you have an existing use and you propose new uses, there tends to be some friction, and you're seeing that here. Unlicensed spectrum or Wi-Fi is a really important part of our economy, so we're looking for places to grow Wi-Fi. And the 6 gigahertz band is definitely one of the places we'd like to do it because it's adjacent to existing unlicensed spectrum used for Wi-Fi. There are, however, utilities that rely on that band, so we're going to have to figure out how we might be able to do both more unlicensed and Wi-Fi, along with protect those utility activities from unreasonable interference. So the FCC started a proceeding on that, but it is admittedly a heated one. We're still having discussions about it. And we're also looking at other places for Wi-Fi to go, including the 5.9 gigahertz band, which is just nearby.
We're talking with FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel. Give us a sense about the extent to which partisan politics enters into this. We have both Republicans and Democrats who are commissioners on the FCC. President Trump has said it is a priority for the country to go into 5G. How much of this is a Republican-Democrat issue? How much of it is the Republicans and Democrats basically united on the goal of advancing 5G as fast as we can?
Oh, I think you've got it. We're united on the goal. We want the United States to lead when it comes to this next generation of wireless technology. But I think when it comes to tactics, we might differ. I'm the senior Democrat at the agency, and I think when I look at the administration right now, we don't have a master plan for 5G service. And in fact, you saw leadership from the Senate write the National Security Advisor in the White House just this week and say, we need a master plan when it comes to 5G. We don't have one. We've got the FCC fighting with the Department of Commerce over airwaves, fighting with the Department of Transportation over airwaves. And we've got the president tweeting out that he's asked Tim Cook for assistance with 5G. This is not a master plan, and we need one. Other economies around the world are making strides, and we don't want to fall behind.
Coming up, the 6th season of the Formula E kicks off this weekend in Saudi Arabia. We'll hear from the California startup powering many of the electric vehicles. More on Lucid batteries, that's next. This is Bloomberg. The public is still waiting for driverless vehicles to truly hit the road, but the CEO of Waymo thinks there is one part of the market that will get rolling first. Last month, John Krafchick told reporters that before we see things like true robo-taxis, it is most likely to be driverless trucks, like those that Waymo has been testing out on public roads in California and the southwestern United States. The company's chief product officer, Dan Chu, joined on Monday from the Techonomy conference in Half Moon Bay, California.
I do think we're very excited about the long-haul trucking opportunity, as there's a lot of demand for it as in a large industry. It's really a foundation for the economy. So we're definitely interested in it. In fact, we've been working on this since 2017, and we've already done a pilot with Google, shipping some of their data center parts in Atlanta.
How has the general rollout been going in cities like Phoenix, where you're looking at robo-taxis and true driverless vehicles?
The rollout has been going really well. I'm really excited about our progress. So we started in 2017, launching an early rider program where we had over 20,000 people sign up in just a matter of days. Nowadays, we have thousands of riders that are taking rides. And most importantly, over the last few months, we've actually been rolling out fully driverless rides. So now we have riders in our rider programs in Phoenix. We can go ahead and hail a ride with a mobile app and have a car show up that has no driver in it at all and go ahead and take various trips with it.
When would we see a bigger rollout, perhaps nationwide, instead of just in select cities of that program?
So we definitely have global ambitions. Our mission is really to make every single mile safer. So we definitely want to get everywhere as soon as we can. But we do think the rollout will be city by city. It'll be incremental. So we will continue to expand as we are in Metro Phoenix and go beyond from there. We've already driven in over 25 cities. We've been testing in new ones as well. So for instance, recently we started testing in Miami. We've also started testing in Los Angeles.
Have you ridden in one? What is it like?
Oh yes, I definitely have. It's an important part of our culture at Waymo for us to actually be what we call dog fooding or trying our own product. It's an incredible experience. We really think it brings that bit of independence, that privacy, that time to yourself. We really do believe it's a whole new product.
That was Waymo Chief Product Officer Dan Chu. Now, the 6th season of Formula E is happening this weekend in Saudi Arabia, where the slickest and fastest all-electric vehicles battle outside Riyadh. And it will all be powered by Lucid. It's an American company based more than 8,000 miles away. Bloomberg's Ed Ledlow has details.
0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds, with a top speed of 174 miles an hour, and all from an electric motor. This is Formula E, the all-electric cousin of Formula One. When the street racing series started in 2014, the cars couldn't complete the race on a single charge. But since last season, that's changed.
Green in Monaco.
And it's thanks to this battery pack, built by a Californian company called Lucid.
We used our proprietary expertise, particularly in thermal modelling and thermal control, in structural analyses, in packaging. We tested it, and we actually manufacture it here in this very building at our headquarters in Silicon Valley.
Season 5 in 2018 was the first time Lucid supplied battery packs for Formula E through its technology arm, Ativa. But under the arrangement, their involvement was kept confidential, and they were labelled as a so-called battery partner of racing giant McLaren. This year is a different story, and Lucid is taking the spotlight and will continue to do so until their contract expires after Season 8 in 2021. So what can Formula E fans expect? Bloomberg got an exclusive look under the hood of Lucid's latest battery designs. They say the trapezium shape and in-house management software is what will help the teams go the distance. But for Lucid, the Formula E deal's actually just a small part of a much bigger plan.
It generates a modest revenue, but really it's a token. The real reason we're doing this is to demonstrate that we have world-class technology, which will find its way into our forthcoming road car.
The Lucid Air is a luxury consumer EV designed to compete against the likes of Tesla and Porsche's electric offering. Production of the vehicle won't begin until the end of 2020, but in the meantime, engineers are building prototypes in small batches at their Newark factory. The focus has been on making the battery packs as lightweight and efficient as possible, using proprietary robotics and scanning technology to increase battery density. Bloomberg NEF says Lucid's Formula E battery pack has 20% more battery density than the nearest consumer EV.
What Lucid's done with its Formula E packs has made them incredibly light and increased the energy density beyond what's commercially available at the moment. So if Lucid can transfer this technology to commercial electric vehicles, it could give them a real advantage when compared to other EVs on the market.
Lucid also says there's potential to sell the battery pack technology to other automakers or form partnerships. For now, they hope their work for Formula E will put them in pole position to capture the consumer EV market in 2020. Ed Ludlow, Bloomberg News, Newark, California.
And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We'll bring you all of the latest in tech throughout the week. Tune in each day at 5 p.m. New York and 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.